about him. Look at it. This is the latest. Look at him. Here he goes again. Well, you know what here he goes again means? He's doing what he said he was going to do. He promised you he was going to do these things, and he walked into office week one, and that's exactly what he's doing. And he's saying, y'all do something about it. And when you try to do something about it, he's going to say, look at them now. Now they're concerned about these issues. Were they talking about that during the campaign? Hell no. That's really it.
Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith are back in the spotlight, once again challenging their own side for losing touch with the very people they say they stand for. Both longtime Democrats, they insist their party still has a real shot at defeating Trump, but only if it's brave enough to let go of some self-destructive patterns. So what exactly are those patterns? Let's take a closer look.
Trump is cool now. He's not just the most powerful guy in the world and just made himself like the richest. He's actually kind of at 78.
Yes.
I mean, rappers like him.
Maher's got a point. The surge in enthusiasm for Donald Trump is truly remarkable. Not long ago, the thought of him regaining serious political traction sounded almost absurd, especially after the nonstop criticism from mainstream outlets that leaned heavily against him. They framed him as finished, buried under endless scandals and outrage. But here's the twist. Every attempt to take him down only made him stronger. Trump pushed through every headline, every accusation, and every effort to silence his voice. Now, he's not just back, he's gaining momentum. Even some former critics are rethinking their stance, drawn to his boldness and refusal to bow to the political establishment. Ironically, the very media campaign designed to end his career may have done the opposite, transforming him into a powerful emblem of resistance that millions proudly stand behind.
The man was impeached twice. He was convicted on 34 felony counts. And the American people still said, he's closer to normal than what we see.
Exactly.
Left. That's what they're saying. He's closer to normal. Why? Because something that pertains, when you talk about the transgender community, for example, and you're talking about the issues that pertain to less than 1% of the population, the Democratic Party came across as if that was a priority more so than the other issues. And so he comes into office. Now you're talking about childbirth, citizenship, and what have you. He knows that's not going to pass the mustard, but he knows that he made that promise. So when he shows up week one on Capitol Hill and he says, this is what we're going to do through an executive order, even though it's going to be shot down through the courts and what have you, he's saying, I kept my promise. A lot of other things that he's going to point to that he's going to try to do. I kept my promise.
So when Trump steps into office and says, here's what we're doing through executive order, even if the courts push back, he's really sending one clear message: I kept my word. That's his playbook: show action, keep promises, and remind people he's doing exactly what he said he would. I've said it plenty of times before Trump understood the assignment. He focused on the real issues that keep everyday Americans awake at night: the economy, the border, and national security. Meanwhile, Democrats were busy twisting themselves into pretzels, trying to satisfy every loud voice on the far left. Trump didn't bury his message under complicated policy talk or empty moral posturing. He spoke plainly about jobs, safety, and stability. And that simplicity struck a chord. Even Bill Maher gets it. He's been warning his own party that chasing ideological perfection while ignoring people's daily struggles is a guaranteed way to lose. Trump's strength was never about being polished or politically correct. It was his focus. He listened to what people were actually feeling, not what elites thought they should feel. And that, more than anything, is why his message still connects today.
You say, what promises did you keep? Now, you might know the answer to that. I'm certainly not questioning your knowledge about that at all. What I'm saying is, what resonated with the voter? What voter out there can look at the Democratic Party at this moment in time and say, there's a voice for us, somebody that speaks for us, that goes up on Capitol Hill and fights the fights that we want them fighting on our behalf? They didn't do that. And that's why their behinds are home, and that man is back into the White House.
Beyond the confusing rhetoric, the left lost touch with its own people. Ordinary Americans, once the heart of the Democratic base, started feeling ignored, dismissed, and politically stranded. They watched party leaders fixate on identity politics, red tape, and elite priorities, while the real struggles of working families went unanswered. Prices climbed, the border crisis worsened, and crime crept into neighborhoods that used to feel safe. Yet their leaders seemed more interested in earning likes online than solving problems in real life. Under the Biden administration, that gap only grew wider. Promises of unity gave way to deeper division and disappointment. Many voters eventually looked around and realized no one was standing up for them, no one tackling their rent spikes, job instability, or growing sense of uncertainty about the country's direction. What started as frustration turned into exhaustion, and that exhaustion has now become detachment. The result? A rising number of Americans are ready to seek leadership somewhere, anywhere other than the party that once claimed to speak for them.
They're talking about him. Look at it. This is the latest. Look at him. Here he goes again. Well, you know what here he goes again means? He's doing what he said he was going to do. He promised you he was going to do these things, and he walked into office week one, and that's exactly what he's doing. And he's saying, y'all do something about it. And when you try to do something about it, he's going to say, look at them now. Now they're concerned about these issues. Were they talking about that during the campaign? Hell no. That's really it.
Trump continues to be the biggest thorn in the side of the Democratic Party, where I'm right, and honestly, it's not hard to understand why. He embodies everything the DNC claims to loathe: blunt honesty, open defiance, and zero patience for political correctness. Yet that's exactly what makes people gravitate toward him. While Democrats spend endless hours fine-tuning their message through polls and polished talking points, Trump speaks like the guy next to you at the bar. Raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically real. For millions of Americans, that's a breath of fresh air in a political world that often feels scripted and fake. As Stephen A. Smith summed it up perfectly, people see Trump as the closest thing to real. They might not agree with everything he says, but they believe he means it. In an era where authenticity is scarce and public trust is fading, Trump's rough edges have somehow turned into his greatest advantage, making him both the Democrats' biggest frustration and their most relentless political nightmare.
Yes, I'm not mad he won
Yeah.
because when I see, especially in the aftermath of the election, some of the things that transpired with the Democratic Party, you know, in effort to manipulate the election and the vote, it really ticked me off. When you hear people talking about practical things, and then I saw folks on the left basically trying to guilt me into voting for you, it bothered me. I might have ended up voting for Kamala Harris because I didn't like how Trump acts. But what I didn't do was call him a racist. I didn't call him a Nazi. I knew Trump before he ran for president.
Yeah.
We talked on the phone. We talk at basketball games or boxing events. I knew this man. And so some of the things that were being said about him, I knew were not true. And I was saying, come on, y'all, that you got to do better.
That strategy of turning Trump into the villain worked once, but only once. In the last election, left-leaning media outlets managed to paint him as a national danger, a reckless force that would tear the country apart. For a while, that fear-driven narrative stuck. But by 2023, the cracks started to show. Many moderate liberals, worn down by inflation, rising crime, and nonstop culture clashes, began to wonder if the real problem wasn't Trump at all, but the establishment that kept warning about him. The exaggerated image pushed by the media no longer lined up with what people were seeing in real life. Trump, with all his flaws, came across as more genuine, more down to earth, and oddly enough, more relatable than his polished but disconnected rivals. When voters looked at Kamala Harris, they saw a politician carefully sticking to the script. When they looked at Trump, they saw someone speaking straight from the gut. That contrast authenticity over appearance was enough to completely shift the game.
Because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now. Because you blew the election, I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues.
Which is?
Democracy and the environment, to my two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration.
The Democrats might have lost Bill Maher's confidence, but I'm not convinced that the GOP is plotting to dismantle democracy either. I get where Maher's coming from. He's uneasy about Trump threatening legal action against media outlets he sees as dishonest. But let's be honest, that's not an attack on democracy. That's someone working within the system's own boundaries. America was designed with guardrails, a web of checks and balances between Congress, the Senate, the courts, and the executive branch, precisely to stop any one person or party from grabbing total control. Turning this nation into a dictatorship overnight simply isn't possible. Yes, tensions are high and political rhetoric is reckless on both sides, but the country's foundation remains firm. For all its flaws and noise, America isn't fragile, it's remarkably resilient. And that's the part Maher seems to miss.
Champion in Washington. They have the courts, they have the House and the Senate, and you totally left me unguarded.
And that's where the Democrats made one of their biggest mistakes, protecting Kamala Harris from the primaries. Instead of giving her the chance to prove herself, to test her ideas, endurance, and connection with voters, they simply handed her the nomination. They assumed familiarity would somehow spark enthusiasm. It didn't. For 4 long years, Harris was mostly a background figure, rarely front and center, quiet on major issues, and seldom displaying the leadership energy people expect from a future president. Then, almost overnight, she was everywhere. On campaign posters, across headlines, and dominating coverage as if voters would suddenly rally behind her. But that plan was doomed from the start. Politics doesn't run on shortcuts. You can't ignite passion around someone the public barely knows. The Democrats gambled on instant excitement, and what they got instead was a spectacular collapse of expectations.
Did you discuss the economy enough? No. You could have discussed the border because unlike Obama, who was quote unquote the deporter-in-chief, according to the Republicans, because he deported more immigrants than Trump did.
According to not just Republicans, but
the
Democrats.
Yeah,
there were
right.
Democrats who called
He
on that.
deported more immigrants than Trump, which means he just didn't talk about it, but he did it.
That was another huge misstep, shielding Kamala Harris from the primaries. Instead of letting her earn her place, the Democrats skipped the test altogether. No trial of ideas, no measure of stamina, no real chance to connect with voters. They simply handed her the nomination, betting that name recognition alone would ignite excitement. It didn't. For 4 years, Harris stayed mostly in the background, quiet, cautious, and rarely visible on the issues that mattered most. Then suddenly she was everywhere, splashed across campaign ads and headlines as if voters were supposed to rally behind her overnight. But that's not how politics works. You can't manufacture passion for someone the public barely knows. The Democrats tried to fast-track enthusiasm, and all they created was a spectacular crash in expectations.
Office, and day one, you sign an executive order that opens the border, and you let more than 12 million immigrants cross the border illegally, and you don't think that's going to be a problem?
Biden's administration ended up undoing much of what Obama had achieved on border control, allowing more than 2 million people to enter the country illegally. What followed was predictable chaos. With little vetting or oversight, many migrants slipped into underground economies tied to illegal drug trade, human trafficking, and other crimes now haunting American cities. Neighborhoods that once felt safe are now struggling with rising crime and overwhelmed social services. This isn't just poor policy, it's a national security crisis that never needed to happen. And ironically, it's Trump who's now trying to fix the fallout. His methods may be tough, even divisive, but at least they're grounded in reality. Borders exist for a reason. Laws mean something. Biden's leniency didn't show compassion, it unleashed disorder. And the ones paying the price are everyday Americans caught in the middle. In the end, the contradictions within the Democratic Party are finally catching up to them. From protecting Kamala Harris to mishandling immigration, their moral outrage often feels selective, more political than principled. Meanwhile, Trump, for all his flaws, has tapped into the frustrations of working Americans who simply want stability, security, and honesty. If Democrats want to win back trust, they'll have to confront their inconsistencies head on. Until then, they'll keep losing the very voters they claim to understand. And that wraps up today's video. If you found this discussion insightful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.